Good day, everyone. Today, I will share more about International Women's Day. Empowered women empower the world. Together, we can break barriers and build bridges towards equality. Overview: International Women's Day is celebrated annually on March 8 to honor women's achievements and promote gender equality. International Women's Day provides important platform to engage with communities, reflect on progress, and commit to positive action. Recognizes progress in women's rights and addresses ongoing issues such as gender-based violence and unequal pay. What are the aims of International Women's Day? Celebrate women's achievements through recognizing and appreciating the contributions of women in various fields, highlighting their influence and successes throughout history and in the present day. Raise awareness of gender inequality through shining a light on persistent issues like the gender pay gap, lack of representation in leadership roles, gender-based violence, and unequal access to education and opportunities. Mobilize action for equality through encouraging individuals, communities, and organizations to take steps towards creating a more inclusive and equitable world for women. Donate and fundraise for women-focused charities and elevate the visibility of their work. Foster solidarity among people of all genders in support of women's rights and gender parity worldwide. Historical background began in the early 20th century, rooted in labor movements advocating for women's rights, including suffrage. The first International Women's Day was celebrated on March 19, 1911 in Australia, Denmark, Germany, and Switzerland. The day was officially recognized by the United Nations in 1977, establishing it as a day to reflect on progress, call for change, and celebrate acts on courage and determination. Key milestones. In 1903, Emmeline Pankhurst founded the Independent Women's Movement, Women's Social and Political Union. And in 1910, Clara Zetkin proposed the idea of an International Women's Day at the International Conference of Working Women. In 1975, the United Nations began officially recognizing International Women's Day. In 1988, Philippines proclaims March 8 as National Women's Day, a Women's Week, and a Women's Role in History Month. And in 2003, IWD marched in Mexico City on March 8 with hundreds of thousands of participants, becomes one of the largest IWD events globally. And lastly, in 2019, largest international IWD concert, Global Citizen Festival, Power of Women with performance from Cardi B, Pharrell Williams, Michelle Obama, Jonas, and more. Themes over the years. UN themes. The UN has adopted various themes since 1996, focusing on different aspects of women's empowerment and gender equality. In 2025 theme, Accelerate Action. The Philippine laws for women are the following. First is the Republic Act of 9262, Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children Act of 2004, or also called VALC. Second, Republic Act 7877, Anti-Sexual Harassment Act of 1995. And lastly, the Republic Act 11313, Safe Spaces Act or Bawal Bastos Law. So first, let's know more about the Republic Act 9262, Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children Act of 2004, or also known VAUC. So what is VAUC under the Republic Act of the Philippines? It refers to any acts or series of acts committed by any person against a woman who is his wife, former wife, or against a woman with whom the person has or had sexual or dating relationship with whom he has a common child, or against her child which resulted or likely to result in physical, sexual, psychological harm or suffering or economic abuse. Seeks to address the prevalence of violence against women and their children by their intimate partners. including husband or ex-husband, live-in partner or former live-in partner, boyfriend or girlfriend, or boyfriend or ex-girlfriend, dating partner or former dating partner. Classifies VAUSI as public crime. VAUSI includes but not limited to the following acts: physical violence, acts which bodily or physically harm. Second is sexual violence, acts which in sexual nature committed against a woman or their child. Third is psychological violence, acts or omissions causing or likely to cause mental or emotional suffering of the victim. Fourth, economic abuse, acts that make or attempt to make a woman financially dependent. So, who may file a complaint under RA 9262? Any citizen having personal knowledge of the circumstances involving the commission of the crime may file a complaint because violence against women and their children is considered a public crime. Is VAUSI committed by men alone? No. Women can also be liable under the law. These are the lesbian partners or girlfriends or former partners of the victims whom she has or had sexual or dating relationship. What are the penalties for offenders? Offenders proven in court to be guilty of the crime shall be penalized with the following: imprisonment ranging from 1 month and 1 day to 20 years, payment of 100,000 to 300,000 in damages, mandatory psychological counseling or psychiatric treatment. Republic Act 7877, the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act of 1995. What is sexual harassment? Work, education, or training-related sexual harassment committed by employer, employee, manager, supervisor, agent of the employer, teacher, instructor, professor, coach, and trainer. Any person who, having authority, influence, or moral ascendancy over another in a work or training or education environment demands, requests, or otherwise requires any sexual favor from the other, regardless of whether the demand, request, or requirement for submission is accepted or not by the object of said act. How is work-related sexual harassment committed? Sexual favor is made in these following conditions. First, hiring. Second, reemployment or continued employment. Third, granting individual favorable compensation, terms, conditions, or privileges. Fourth, if individual refuses to grant sexual favors, it may result into limiting, segregating, or classifying the employee, which is in any way would discriminate, deprive, or diminish employment opportunities, otherwise adversely affect said employee. B. Said acts would impair the employee's right or privileges under existing labor laws. C. The above acts would result in intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment for the employee. Note: a person who directs or induces another person to commit any act of sexual harassment or who cooperates to commit the act without which the said act would not have been committed will also be held liable under the law. Republic Act 11313, Safe Spaces Act or Bawal Bastos Law. What does Safe Spaces Act cover? The law covers all forms of gender-based sexual harassment committed in public spaces, educational or training institutions, workplaces, as well as online. Safe Spaces Act cover: first is gender-based streets and public spaces. Second, gender-based sexual harassment in workplaces. Third is gender-based sexual harassments in educational and training institutions. Gender-based streets and public spaces sexual harassment. Defined as acts which are committed through any unwanted, uninvited sexual actions or remarks against any person regardless of the motive or committing such actions or remarks. Public spaces referred to under this law are the following. First is streets and alleys, roads and sidewalks, buildings, restaurants and cafe, public parks, schools and churches, government offices, malls and public markets, transportation, terminals, and common carriers, spaces used as evacuation centers, public utility vehicles, public washrooms, private vehicles covered by app-based transport network services, recreational spaces such as but not limited to cinema malls, theaters and spas, bars and clubs, resorts and water parks, hotels and casinos, internet shops, and all other areas regardless of the ownership, openly accessible or offered to be accessed by the public. What are the acts of gender-based sexual harassment in public spaces? A. Catcalling or unwanted remarks towards a person, commonly done in a form of wolf whistling and the following. Misogynistic remarks or slurs, statements that are indicative of the feeling of hating women or the belief that men are inherently better than women. Transphobic remarks or slurs, statements that are indicative of fear, hatred, or aversion towards persons whose gender identically and or expressions do not conform with the sex assigned at birth. Sexist remarks or slurs, statements that are indicative of prejudice, stereotyping, or discrimination on the basis of sex, typically against women. Homophobic remarks or slurs are indicative of fear, hatred, or identity of lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, pansexual, and such other persons of diverse sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, or towards any person perceived to or actually have experienced same-sex attraction. B. Persistent uninvited comments or gestures on a person's appearance. C. Relentless requests of personal details. D. Statement of sexual comments and suggestions. C. Public masturbation or flashing of private parts. Groping, making offensive body gestures at someone and other similar lewd sexual actions. F. Any advances, whether verbal or physical, that is unwanted and has threatened one's sense of personal space and physical safety. This may include cursing, leering, and intrusive gazing, and taunting. Persistent telling of sexual jokes, use of sexual names, and H. Stalking or conducting directed at a person involving the repeated visual or physical proximity, non-consensual communication, or a combination thereof that cause or will likely cause a person to fear for one's own safety or the safety of others, or to suffer emotional distress. What are the penalties for offenders? Verbal GBSH. First offense, 12 hours community service inclusive of gender sensitivity training and 1,000 fine. Second offense, imprisonment of 6 to 10 days or 3,000 fine. Third offense, imprisonment of 11 to 30 days and 10,000 fine. Section 12B, specific acts and penalties of gender-based sexual harassment is streets and public spaces, RA 11313 IRR. Demonstrated GBSH. First offense, 12 hours community service inclusive of GST and 10,000 pesos fine. Second offense, imprisonment of 11 to 30 days or 15,000 fines. Third offense, imprisonment of 1 month and 1 day to 9 months and 20,000 fine. GBSH, through stalking or physical advances such as touching, pinching, or brushing against the genitalian, groin, breast, buttocks, face, arms of the victim. First offense, imprisonment of 11 to 30 days or a fine of 30,000 pesos, provided that it includes attendance in a GST to be conducted by PNP in coordination with LGU and PCW. Second offense, imprisonment of 1 month and 1 day to 6 months or a fine of 50,000 pesos. Third offense, imprisonment of 4 months and 1 day to 6 months and 100,000 pesos fine. Local government units or LGUs may come up with ordinances that impose heavier penalties for the acts specified in the Safe Space Act, subject to the conditions set under the Administrative Code. Additional penalties. If perpetrator is a driver or operator of a PUV, cancellation of license of the driver by the LTO, suspension of revocation of franchise by LTFRB. This sanction may be imposed upon order by the proper court or upon order of the LTO or LTFRB in an administrative proceeding. Where can victims of GBSH in street and public spaces seek assistance? In all cases, first, the local government unit via local anti-sexual harassment hotline, nearest police station precinct through their Women and Children's Protection Desk, local social welfare and development office, public attorney's office subject of PAWS persons qualified for legal assistance procedure, local traffic enforcer LTO or LTFRV, ASH desk officer of the LGU, provincial municipal, city, or barangay, ASH officer designated by the operator of establishment, or example, security officer. Gender-based online sexual harassment. Gender-based online sexual harassment includes acts that use information and communication technology in terrorizing and intimidating victims through threats, physically, psychological, or emotional, unwanted sexual, misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic, and sexist remarks and comments online, whether publicly or through direct and private messages. Invasion of the victim's privacy through cyberstalking and insistent messaging. Uploading and sharing without the consent of the victim in any form of media that contains photos, voice, or video with sexual content. Any unauthorized recording and sharing of any of the victim's photos, videos, or any information online. Impersonating identities of victims online or posting lies about victims to harm their reputation, or filing false abuse reports to online platforms to silence victims. What is cyberstalking? Cyberstalking is a form of stalking that is committed through an electronic medium in which online communication takes place. To constitute an offense, the conduct must be manifested through the repeated use of electronic communications in stalking. Stalking, an online profile which is publicly accessible in itself, constitute an offense. What are the penalties of online GBSH? The penalty of online GBSH violation is prison correctional in its medium period, imprisonment of 6 months and 1 day to 2 years and 4 months, or a fine of not less than 100,000 pesos but not more than 500,000 pesos, or both at the discretion of the court. If the perpetrator is a juridical person, its license or franchise shall be automatically deemed revoked, and the person liable shall be the officers thereof, including the editor or reporter in the case of print media, and the station manager, editor, and broadcaster in the case of broadcast media. An alien or foreigner who commits gender-based online sexual harassment shall be subject to deportation proceedings after serving sentence and payment of fines. Where can victim of online GBSH file a complaint? The victim can file a complaint directly with the National Bureau of Investigation Cybercrime Division, the Philippine National Police Anti-Cybercrime Group, or the Office of the Cybercrime of the Department of Justice. Practical tips in saving digital evidence and online reporting. Take note of the Uniform Resource Locator or URL, or the web address of the website or social media account of the perpetrator. Make a printout of the content being complained of by opening a browser, Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, or etc. on a laptop or desktop, going to the pertinent account page and print the said web page. Contact authorities via the PNP's Anti-Cybercrime Group or Complaint Desk in the link below. Gender-based sexual harassment in the workplace includes the following: an act or series of acts involving any unwelcome sexual advances, requests, or demands for sexual favors, or any acts of sexual nature, whether done verbally, physically, or through the use of technology such as text text messaging or electronic mail, or through any other forms of information and communication system that has or could have detrimental effect on the conditions of an individual's employment or education, job performance, or opportunities, affecting the dignity of a person, which is unwelcome, unreasonable, and offensive to the recipient, whether done verbally, physically, or through the use of technology such as text messaging or electronic mail, or through any other forms of information and communication system. Conduct that is unwelcome and pervasive and creates an intimidating, hostile, or humiliating environment for the recipient. Is sexual harassment between peers or by a subordinate to a superior now covered under this law? Yes. The first law to penalize sexual harassment, Anti-Sexual Harassment Act of 1995, or also known as Republic Act No. 7877, recognized that sexual harassment occurs in work, education, and training environments. However, it requires that existence of authority, influence, or moral ascendancy between the offender and the offended party. It did not specifically address the issue of hostile environment resulting from sexual harassment between peers or co-employees or this committed against a superior. The Safe Spaces Act addresses these gaps by recognizing that sexual harassment can be committed between peers or by a subordinate to a superior officer. What can a victim of workplace GBSH do? The victim can file an administrative complaint with the Committee on Decorum and Investigation and/or file a civil or criminal case before the courts. What are the penalties for employers? Failure to implement their duties. Fine of not less than 5,000 under the law. Non-action on reporting acts of GBSH in their workplace. Fine of none less than 10,000 pesos but not more than 15,000 pesos. Statistics. According to the World Health Organization, 67% accounted for women for the global health and social care workforce. It is estimated that women provide essential health services for around 5 billion people. According to the Earth Web, about 43% of business owners are owned by women, and about 90% of businesses worldwide claim to have one or more women in top executive position. According to International Task Force on Teachers for Education 2030, the promotion of women has growth of 64% of world's teaching workforce. An estimated of 736 million women, almost 1 in 3, have been subjected to physical and/or sexual intimate partner violence, non-partner sexual violence, or both at least once in their life. 30% of women aged 50 and older. 91% of trafficking victims for sexual exploitation are females. An analysis of court cases shows that female victims are subjected to physical or extreme violence at the hands of traffickers at a rate of 3 times higher than males. Women and girls suffer most from the dearth of safety managed water and sanitation. Women and girls are responsible for water collection in 70% of households without access to water on premises. Menstrual hygiene management is difficult in the absence of water, soap, and gender-responsive sanitation facilities, whether at home, school, or work. Women are paid less than men. The gender wage gap is estimated to be 20%. This means that women earn 80% of what men earn. Through this, figures understate the real extent of gender pay gaps, particularly in developing countries where informal self-employment is prevalent. Women also face the motherhood wage penalty, which increases as the number of children a woman has increases. Women's achievement. In 400 BC, Agnodice, recognized as one of the first female gynecologists, Agnodice is said to have courageously practiced medicine in Greece when women faced the death penalty for doing so. Eventually caught, she was vindicated and allowed to continue when patients came to her defense. In 1691, Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, following criticism for studying secular texts, celebrated writer and nun Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz of Mexico memorably defended women's right to education in 1691 by proclaiming one can perfectly well philosophize while cooking supper. A national icon today, she appears on Mexican currency. In 1893, Kate Sheppard, New Zealand's most celebrated suffragist, Kate Sheppard, along with fellow campaigners, presented a monster petition to Parliament demanding women's suffrage with nearly 30,000 signatures, an instrument move that led to the New Zealand becoming the first self-governing country to grant national voting rights to women in 1893. In 1951, Doria Shafik catalyzed a women's rights movement in Egypt when in 1951 she, alongside 1,500 women, stormed parliament demanding full political rights, pay equality, and reforms to personal status laws. These efforts, along with the countless others to come, helped pave the way to women's right to vote in 1956. Also, in 1951, British chemist Rosalind Franklin paved the way for the discovery of DNA's double helix structure through the revolutionary use of X-ray diffraction. Franklin captured the critical photos evidence through 100 hours of extremely fine beam X-ray exposure from a machine she had refined. In 1973, Billie Jean King, a pioneering American tennis champion and social change activist, threatened to boycott the U.S. Open in 1973 unless women were given equal prize money, a demand that was met, making the U.S. Open the first major tournament of its kind to offer pay equality. As a plaintiff in 1992, Unity Doe won a historical case enabling women married to non-citizens that right to confer nationality to their children. Later, as Botswana's first female high court judge, she gained international acclaim on a case that allowed Botswana's San people to return to their ancestral homelands. Taking their government to court on child marriage, former child brides Loveness Mudzuru and Ruvimbu Chupudzi made history in 2016 when Zimbabwe's constitutional courts ruled in their favor, stating that nobody in the country may enter into marriage, including customary law unions, before the age of 18. Call to action: raise awareness, educate others about women's equality and the barriers they face, advocate for change, lobby for policies that promote gender equality and women's rights, empower women, encourage young women and girls to become leaders and catalysts for change, hold institutions accountable, urge institutions to deliver on their commitments to gender equality, support women, fundraise for women-focused charities, and support organizations that advocate for women's rights. International Women's Day serves as a reminder of both progress made and challenges that remain in the fight for gender equality. And that's all for today. Thank you for listening.